Okay, so this week for Parshas Chukas, I wanted to go back to a topic which we've been discussing numerous times throughout this year, which is the concept of the chok. The chok, which is a mitzvah which we don't have a reason for. Or, as we'll see soon, even if we have a reason for, that's not what we're not doing it for that reason. That changes completely the way that someone is religious, the way that someone is observant. If we are doing things only because they make sense to us, it's a different, we sort of feel, as we'll see, very empowered to make adjustments at will. And if we feel that there are chukim, there are things which are beyond our understanding, it makes us subservient to what it says in the Torah, and that's a completely different world. It's all the difference, as we'll see, between an Oved Hashem and a non-Oved Hashem. You can have other books of ethics. Aristotle wrote a book of ethics, and after him, many others wrote books on ethics. And they disagree. And it keeps changing. And one could say that in today's generation, as each event happens, the world chooses, how do we want to understand this? How do we spin this? And the ethics of the world are constantly changing because people aren't turning to books and to ancient philosophers to tell them right and wrong, but people are turning to their own feelings, to their own heart. Now, just take for example, just recently, there's been a change in the way that people perceive the people whose jobs it is to enforce the law, specifically police officers. You notice, and this doesn't require too much investigation, you'll notice that there's been a huge shift in terms of the respect and just the way that they are perceived within the last few months, and more so over the last few years, differently than thousands of years which preceded it, where certain people were seen, again, whether you like them or not, but you saw them in a different role, and that's changed. And so the ethics today keeps changing, because it's really mood swings which are shifting the way that people see right and wrong. And that's really scary. If right and wrong, which there should be black and white, and there should be a gray area, and that was not a racial comment, but there should be, and there's this very thin line of areas which are gray, and now everything is in question, because whatever we're feeling today, that's going to be right and wrong. And Parshas Chukas brings us back to Hashem's "because I said so." And so when you have people saying that the Bible can't be correct because it promotes genocide, so if you have people saying something like that, that's because, now again, that's a good question, and we do need to resolve that problem. Why does the Torah command such a thing? But what's your attitude towards it as a result of that? Are you therefore saying that you, as a result of your personal feelings, are now empowered to make adjustments? Parshas Chukas brings us back to that. So the first Rashi in the Torah, in the Parsha, begins, Zos Chukas HaTorah. This is on page 838. And Rashi says, this is the statute of the Torah. The question that Rashi asks, without actually asking the question, is there are 613 laws in the Torah. Why does this one get Zos Chukas HaTorah? And if you'll tell me this is a chok, but there are other chukim, and the answer is, Lefisha Satan ve'umos ha'olam, because the Satan and the nations of the world, Monin es Yisrael. Monin would be they subpoena us, they, what's a better word, demand of us Ma mitzvah zos, what is this mitzvah? Uma tam yeshba, what reason is there? V'fikach kasav ba'chuka. So this, says Rashi, based on the Medrash Tanchuma, that this mitzvah of paraduma is the one that is singled out as the one which seems the most illogical. And the question comes here. And therefore, when we come to such a mitzvah, the most illogical mitzvah, so Rashi says the Torah uses the word chuka, which means gezerah hi milfanai, it is a decree from before me. Ein lecha reshus laharher achareha, you have no permission to question it, to doubt it, to muse over it. Who is asking us these questions? So I think we've mentioned this many times before, but we'll make the diak again. Satan and the Umos Ha'olam. When's the last time you had a conversation with a person in the nation of the world? Maybe yesterday, the day before. When's the last time you had a conversation with the Satan? Okay. So clearly what Rashi means is that it's the evil inclination inside you. That inside each of us, there's something that says, well, why should I do that? Now, some people can overcome it because we do the mitzvahs anyway. But for some people, that Satan, that Yetzer Hara of I don't understand it, why should I do it, is so powerful. And at that point, the Torah says, Zos Chukas HaTorah Gezeira Hi Milfanai, it is a decree, and you have no right to question it. That's the answer. To ourselves and to the nations of the world. The Medrash, we'll come back to all this. The Medrash, there's a Medrash quoted by Rabbi Elia Lapian in Lev Eliyahu. And this is a powerful Medrash. I'm not going to read all the words of the Medrash that he quotes, but just the highlights. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe lemor zos chukas haTorah, v'yikchu elacha para aduma, you shall take for yourself a red heifer. Para, the heifer, Elu Yisrael is the Jewish people. Shenamar, as it says in Hosea 4, Ki kapara sorera sarar Yisrael, for like a rebellious cow, the Jewish people have rebelled. Sorera, more from the language of turning away, wayward, I think would be a technical word. For like a wayward cow, the Jewish people have strayed. Aduma, red. Elu Yisrael, that refers to the Jewish people. As it says in Eicha, Admu etzem mipeninim. Tamima, perfect. Elu, without blemish. Elu Yisrael, that's the Jewish people who are referred to in Shir Hashirim as Yonasi, Samasi, my dove, my perfect one. Asher ein bamum, which has no blemish, says the Medrash, Elu Yisrael, that's the Jewish people, of whom it says in Shir Hashirim, Kulach Yafa Rayasi Umum Ein Bach, you are completely beautiful, my beloved, my dear one, and there is no blemish in you. Para, Aduma, Temima, Asher Ein Bamum, all four different terms, all referring to the Jewish people. We are the red cow. Asher lo Allah Allah ha'ol, which has not taken a yoke or borne a yoke, says the Medrash, that refers to the generation of the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, who threw off or refused to accept the yoke of the sovereignty of heaven. When the Satem Osa El Elazar HaKohen shall come Elazar the Kohen, which the Medrash says refers to Yirmiyahu, who was a Kohen, V'hotzi Osa El Michutz Lamachne, and he shall take the red heifer outside of the camp. Meaning that Yirmiyahu will come and forewarn and eventually lead the Jewish people into exile. V'shachat osa lefanav, and it shall be slaughtered before him, refers to the many deaths and murders that occurred to the Jewish people during the times of the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. And then v'saraf es hapara le'enav, you shall burn the red heifer before his eyes, refers to the burning of the Beis Hamikdash, of the house of Hashem. Es ora, es besara, es dama, al pirsha yisraf, all the parts of the red heifer should be burnt. But then va'asaf ish tahor will come along Hashem, who is the ish, Hashem ish malchama, tahor, Hashem who is tahor einayim, as a verse in Habakkuk, and he will gather the ashes of the para. He will gather the burnt remnants and bring them together. That refers to Hashem, who eventually, after a long time in the exile, will regather and bring back the scattered ashes of the Jewish people. Amazing medrash. Just an amazing medrash quoted by Rabbi Lapian. And the imagery is so powerful. The prophecy is so clear.
So what is the Adon supposed to represent?
So he says that it refers to the Jewish people are referred to in Eicha as they've been reddened. And
what does that mean?
Well, just things were good for them, or red can mean different things. So he's not, in Echad means something negative. But so he says, take a look at the language. There's a famous medrash Eicha, that says that Eicha begins, Eicha Yashva Vadad, Ha'ir Abbasiyam, and there it says, Ha'isa Ke'almana. She has become like a widow. And everyone knows the medrash. It doesn't say Haisa Almana, she is a widow, but Ke Almana, like a widow, because the Jewish people are being treated by Hashem as if Hashem, so to speak, is dead to us. But Hashem will return. It's Ke Almana. So it's interesting that when the verse in Hosea, which compares the Jewish people to a wayward ox, a wayward cow, it doesn't say para sorera, it says ke para sorera. The Jewish people are behaving like a red heifer that's gone wayward. However, when it comes to all the complementary things, such as has no blemish and perfect, there the verses don't use the word ka. And Rabbi Lapian elaborates on this. We're not going to go into his whole elaboration, but basically showing that even when the Torah, even when the Medrash is referring to the Jewish people about to experience destruction and all kinds of we're comparing them to something negative, it's always weak as opposed to the comparison to something positive, which is strong. But we're going to move past that and come to what is his main point. Rabbi Lapian says, in the world, you'll find two sets of laws of behavior. The laws of kings and the laws of doctors. Let's explain, he says. The king will write in his laws a constitution. He will put down a system of laws that say you shouldn't kill, and now you'll need 100 books to explain what the definition of murder is. Right? Go look in any law library. It says you can't steal. What's stealing? How many years in jail do you get for this? Do you get for that? And then once it gets broken down, you have all these laws of the king, of things that the king prohibited. And along with those laws, there must be, in every country, there must be a system of punishment for the people who transgress that law. But then there are books written by doctors, and they also give instructions to everyone for what they should and shouldn't do. The doctors will say, do not eat too much of the following foods. Right? Do not do these actions. Do not consume mercury. We wouldn't know that mercury is not okay unless some scientist did research and found that mercury was dangerous. So Thank God someone did that a while ago. So by now, I think most things have removed mercury. But up till 20 years ago, they weren't so careful with lead. So comes some doctors and they do their research and find all the harmful effects of lead in toys or lead in coffee mugs, and they've removed them. And now we're assuming people are healthier. And as doctors will keep learning more about how the human body works, they will also give further instructions on how people should behave. But doctors also will not get anyone to listen to unless those books include punishments. Do not do this or such and such will happen. Let's take an example, I think that everyone by now has realized this. If you smoke cigarettes, so you will lose 10 to 20 years of life, I think is what they say, plus the quality of life will be a lot worse. So without those warnings, if they just say it's unhealthy for you, it's not healthy, you're not going to convince someone to give it up. But if you give, and the more harsh the punishment that the doctors warn about, the more serious something is. Right? Says Rabbi Lapian, those are the two systems. What's the difference between them? So he says, the king's laws, you only get punished if you're caught, if you're found guilty, and even then you can throw yourself on the mercy of the court, and the judge or the king can excuse you, can pardon you, and it's as if you didn't commit the crime. But a person comes to the doctor and says, I swallowed this cyanide, what should I do? So the doctor can't say, don't do it again, we'll let you go this time, but don't do it again. I mean, if you can perform some kind of surgery, pump the stomach, I don't know what you can do, cyanide probably works too fast, but so not much you can do. So the doctor can't forgive and forego. You've done what you've done, and the harmful effects are not open for being excused.
But that's because the doctor didn't make up the punishments. The doctor is just reporting. He's not really forming a system of law. He's just reporting what has been found.
Right.
So it's
but he's the one who wrote the book.
I know, but he's not the one who's determined what the punishment. In other words, a king can forgive what he's enacted, but a doctor can't forgive what he's not enacted. In other words, he didn't design the system. It's just reporting.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair to say. But still, that's the difference. Now, where am I going with this? Says Rabbi Lapian, the two systems are clear, right? The system of the king and the system of the doctor. Which one is the Torah? So many people would think, I think most people would react, that the Torah is much more like the system of the king. Says Rabbi Lapian, you'd be disagreeing with a statement of Rashi in Parshas Bashalach. I'll read it to you. Right? There it says, Vayomer, Hashem says, Im shamoa tishma l'kol Hashem Elokecha. If you will listen to the voice of Hashem your God, v'hayashar be'einav ta'aseh, and you will do what is upright in His eyes, v'hazanta le'mitzvosav, and you shall listen to His commandments. And notice the next few words. V'shamarta kol chukav, and you will keep all the statutes. Then, kalamachla asher samti b'mitzrayim, all the illnesses which I placed upon Egypt, lo asim alecha, I will not place them upon you. Ki ani Hashem rofecha, for I am Hashem, your healer. Now let's be very, very exacting in this verse. Simply read, Hashem is saying reward and punishment. If you follow my mitzvos, I won't give you illnesses. Which sounds much like the laws of the king, right? If you don't commit murder, you won't sit in prison for 50 years. If you keep my mitzvahs, you won't get punished. Well, why does it finish at the end, for I am Hashem, your healer? What does Hashem healing have to do with it? If anything, it should be, for I am Hashem, the one who makes you sick. Right? If you follow my mitzvahs, I won't make you sick, because I'm the one who decides whether you get an illness or not.
So maybe he he has instituted that you will get the illness, but I will heal it, so you won't.
But it doesn't say I will heal it. It says if you do these things, then you won't get sick.
I know.
So you have to add, as some commentaries do, but if you do get sick, I'll heal you. But that's not what it says in the verse.
But it may mean that you really will get the illness, but you won't know that you've got it because I will heal you so quickly that you.
But that's not lo asim alecha. I mean, the simply, right?
But Hashem is, I don't know how it fits in, but Hashem is our creator. So I'm wondering if there's somewhat of that. He's, the fact that he's our creator and our bodies, we don't fully understand.
Yeah, absolutely. But it doesn't.
I don't know how to connect that.
Right, because if it would have said, for I am Hashem, who made you, I think that would work. But here it says, I am Hashem, Rofecha, your healer.
But because he's the creator, he and he's omnipotent, he could heal something that he's created.
Right, that's correct. But you can't use Hashem's being a healer as a reason for why Hashem is the one who won't let you get the illness. That's what it says. If you do the right thing, you won't get sick because I am Hashem, your healer.
But if we're doing the right things, that he, knowing our constitution, and we might not, I mean, not that we do, but knowing the constitution that he's given us and many factors that we aren't aware of, he can, if we follow the prescription, in other words, and he's made our bodies, there could be potentially, if we would do that, a certain protective and
you're right. That's true. But again, we're in the text. The text says you won't get sick. The Torah doesn't say, and if you do, I will heal you. So what we're specifically referring to the type of behavior which you do, which as a result of it, Hashem will not allow you to get sick.
But yet we don't do that.
No, but that's not what the verse is referring to. The verse is referring to specifically, if you do these things, you won't get sick. Then it should say, either because I am Hashem, your protector, or I am Hashem, your maker, or it could even say, I am Hashem who makes sick. But I am Hashem who heals can't be a reason for why you won't get sick. So listen to what Rashi says. Ki ani Hashem rofecha, for I am Hashem your healer. Melamedcha Torah mitzvos lamanti natzel mehem. I'm teaching you Torah and mitzvos so that you may be saved from them. Now, this is incredible Rashi. You could have read this Rashi 1,000 times and not seen this. Kirofe hazeh, for Hashem is like a doctor. Ha'omer la'adam al tochal devarim shemachzirim os chalidei choli. But Hashem is like a doctor telling you, don't eat these things which make you sick. The translation of Ki ani Hashem rofecha is not, I am Hashem your healer, but I am Hashem, the healer, who's instructing you on what you should eat or not eat so that you don't get sick. Healer doesn't mean the one who heals, but the one who is the doctor, who through his knowledge of what heals knows what makes you sick. And so Hashem is not going to make you sick or keep you from getting sick. Hashem is giving us the Torah, and the Torah, following its laws, is a prescription, let's go with that, for how not to get sick. Ani Hashem Rafecha means I am the research doctor. That's what Rashi says. Which means that it's not that Hashem has given us instructions. And as a result of that, because someone kills, prison sentence is not direct correlation to killing. It's just the way that we punish. In some places they flog you, in some places they torture you, in some places they lock you in jail, in some places they make you pay money, in some places they give you a promotion. I mean, all in different places there are different reactions to the same crime. sometimes even within the same country, you can have one person commits crimes and is not held accountable, and someone else commits crimes and
I
is.
saw that on my
Right,
email.
It's called
and-
corruption.
Right. So that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that the Torah is not like we said before, the system of the king giving instructions and warnings. The system of the Torah, says Rashi in Parshas Beshalach, is like the system of the doctor. It's the averos which make you sick. Not because, like people say, eating non-kosher is not healthy, and therefore the Torah tells you not to eat. But what it means is that certain sins affect your soul in a certain way, which will result in your body being affected in a certain way, so that this sin has a physical effect on one part of the body, that sin has a physical effect on another part of the body, and so there's a direct correlation, and so Hashem is giving you, the Torah is in a sense an anatomy book, telling you how to perfect through the 365 negative commandments, how to keep healthy the 365 sinews, and through the 248 positive commandments, how to maintain the spiritual and resulting physical health of the 248 limbs.
How do you explain illness in the person who's, or even in tzaddik? Take a tzaddik who, as far as we can see, does everything, and why does he ever get sick?
So there you have something, that's not an onesh, that's not a punishment. There's other reasons why people get sick. And there could be certain types of things that need to be fixed, and certain types of issues from previous lifetimes, a whole system of reward and punishment. But I shouldn't use the word punishment. There it's just not punishment. There's other reasons why things happen. There's even something called Yisurim Shel Ava, which is suffering which is a whole complicated thing, where Hashem loves someone, He gives them suffering to increase their merit and increase their challenge, or whatever. That's beyond our topic. You don't need to know. The point, but that's just in order for you to understand, why is this happening to me? And if someone is really a good person that doesn't deserve it, then they have to figure out the other reasons. But for most of us, if things happen to us, we just have to say that means it's a message that I need to better myself. I'm doing something wrong, and especially if I can find some kind of correlation to something that I'm failing in, so that's very simple to figure it out. But we understand we're not perfect, and so the Torah is telling you, here's a system by which you can maintain, once more, spiritual and a resulting physical health. An amazing teaching from Rabbi Lapian. The reason. I'm sorry, I skipped a step. Which means, when it comes to the king, he's able to forgive, like you said, because the king really made up these laws. But in the case of Hashem, even though Hashem made it up, but it's a natural cause, an effect. So how does forgiveness work? How does teshuvah work? If a person has sinned with their with mitzvah number 27, and as a result, I'm making this up, so please, not an example. As a result, they spiritually blemished the spiritual equivalent of the lungs. And as a result of that, they received as punishment bronchitis. They committed a certain sin, and their punishment was bronchitis. As we're saying now, it's not that they got bronchitis because God spun the wheel of punishments, and wherever it landed, that's what the person got, a certain amount of suffering. The spiritual blemish that you create draws upon you a certain type of illness. So then, what does teshuvah do? You committed that sin, you stole, you robbed, you hurt someone. So in cases where you can fix the avera, maybe. But if someone ate not kosher, you can't fix that. You did it. And in the same way that someone consumes cyanide or arsenic or any of these poisons, they can't feel bad about it. If someone consumes something that's spiritually unhealthy, feeling bad about it shouldn't do anything. But yet, it works. Teshuvah works. How do we understand that? So says Rabbi Lapian, because there are two kinds of illnesses. There are illnesses which are a result of something internal and an illness which is a result of something external. If someone has a hereditary disease, correct me if I'm wrong, but hereditary diseases can't be excised from the body. Maybe you can find something but you can't.
They're getting there.
Right. But I mean, as of now, natural science, so far, you can't, maybe you can mess with the DNA, but you can't take away someone's inclination or leaning towards a certain illness. So if, let's say, just use this example, if let's say someone has a family history of heart disease, they cannot remove that influence ever. They might be able to control it and eat properly, but there will always remain on them the influence of the hereditary heart disease, so that they will forever be more sensitive and more prone to that kind of disease. As opposed to something which the person is not inclined naturally towards, but it's something which is affecting that person for some reason. So let's say a bacteria has entered the body. You can actually destroy that with amoxicillin, and that will destroy that illness, and then it's completely gone, and at least naturally speaking, and there are always exceptions to this, there's no reason why that should ever come back without something new happening. That illness, you can actually get rid of that. So he says, now obviously there's exceptions. There's sometimes when something comes from the outside, which remains forever. But just generally speaking, that's a fair division. So he says, the Jewish people are not a para sorera, a wayward cow. We are ke para sorera, like a wayward cow. The difference is the sins are not naturally within us. They're external. They are something which we bring in. And so the reason why a person can eat not kosher and then do teshuvah and it doesn't affect him is because when he does teshuvah, that's the penicillin which completely uproots and removes the sin. It's not like the sin has entered and become part of the person, where you can no longer remove it. Which means, he says, that's the pshat. I don't want to apply this to Rabbi Yopian, because he doesn't really say these words. So I guess I'll say it on my own. But that itself has no logic either. In other words, if it's not something which is naturally within the person, but it just affects you, then you're back to, then why should this thing affect you in this way? And so in the end, you're always going to have to invoke the concept of chukah chukakti, which means that the para aduma can at the same time make someone who's tahor tameh and someone who's tameh tahor, and we question and we say that doesn't make sense. Either it's an agent for purification or it's an agent for contamination. And the answer is it could be both, because it's not natural to the Jewish people, the whole concept of sin. And therefore, the Jewish people being this para aduma, this wayward cow, even when we commit the sin, it affects us in a way, but it doesn't really affect us. And so the rules are going to be different than, let's say, someone who doesn't have the power of the Jewish people. If you're someone who's not a Jew, the sin which they do might actually get into them and become a part of them. Someone asked me this week, they said that the Gemara tells us that by eating non-kosher food, the person becomes spiritually blocked up. So he asked a fair question, which is, then why didn't God make this one of the 7 Noachide laws in order to allow the Gentiles to not become blocked up? Fair question, right? If it's a practical benefit, so why didn't God give them the option of eating kosher?
But I thought it only blocks up the Jews.
Why? Why does it only block up the Jews?
Because only we're commanded to do it.
So, is it the commandment? But we're saying it's the other way. We're saying it blocks up anyway. The commandment is because God told us, by the way, this blocks you up. Because we're reading it the other way.
Us the punishment, and you didn't give it to.
No, but if we're saying it's a natural effect, then it's a natural effect. Unless, which is the way the commentaries say it, is that it only causes a blockage for those who are spiritually sensitive.
Yeah.
So we have the peanut allergy, or in this case, we have the lobster allergy, because we are spiritually sensitive, because we are connected to a higher realm. And all that, what I'm saying, is in the realm of chok, is in the realm of there really is no reason for why that should be so. At this point, it's really the way Hashem said that it should be.
Well, then, keeping kosher is no longer a chok. If you say it causes you to have a spiritual blockage, then that's no longer a chok. You have a reason for it.
Well, Rashi didn't use that as the example of chok, and the truth is we can find reasons for everything, but it's not the all-encompassing reason. And even Rashi gives, as we've discussed many times, Rashi himself gives a reason for the paraduma just a few verses later.
It's something with paraduma that a wayward cow. Where do we get that from?
That's a verse in Hosea, that the Jewish people are compared to a wayward cow.
So so we're going to say that that's why it says here paraduma, that
Right.
it's equivalent to Israel.
That's what that medrash understands. So that medrash is applying some reason. Even when you find some reason, you're never going to explain all the parts of the paraduma. And really, it's the contradiction in the paraduma which makes it a big chok, that it contaminates and it purifies. Yeah, which one does it do? That's something which we can't understand. But the paraduma, you can explain certain parts of it, but even there, you have to know that that's not really the real reason. The thing is, we have to ignore the reasons. We're not supposed to keep the mitzvahs because they make sense to us. So to a certain extent, even though when we learn, we can sit in a class and we can discuss exactly what you're saying, that kosher food has this spiritual health that comes with it. And not only spiritual, but it's going to result in a physical health. So you could say that kashrus keeps you healthy, but that's only an intellectual pursuit. When it actually comes to the performance of mitzvahs, we don't take that we don't make that the drive for why we perform mitzvahs. And the less we take that as our drive, the more that we focus on the fact that it's a chok that Hashem commanded us, the greater the performance of the mitzvah is. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz has a famous drasha. I don't have time to go into the whole thing, but it's based on the Haftorah in Parshas Vayechi. When David HaMelech passes from the world, he leaves his son Shlomo with instructions. And he says to Shlomo, I can't tell you exactly what to do, because David had to avoid doing things which would be seen by others as acts of vengeance and things which are... He had to be very careful with how he does this, especially since we know that Shlomo had to... it was working hard to maintain, to keep all the Jewish people under him. There was a rebellion in his days, and even though it didn't completely happen until he died, but... So David says to him, there are two people you need to take down. Let's leave Yoav aside for now. But to, where is it? Shimi ben Gera, hu kilalani klalonim retzes. He threw out a really, really bad curse against David while David was running from Avshalom, and he needed to punish Shimi, but not because he wanted to punish Shimi, but because Shimi needed to be punished. However, if David gives instructions that Shimi should be punished, people will see this as David killing someone who was really beloved by the Jewish people. Shimi ben Gera was a great person amongst the Jewish people. So the words he says to his son Shlomo, Ata al tenakehu, don't let him get away with it. Ki ish chacham ata, because I know that you're wise. V'yadata es asher ta'aseh lo, and you'll know what to do. V'horadata es sevaso b'dam sha'ol, and you will bring him down in his into the underground. Basically, you're going to have him killed. And I'm not telling you how to do it, because if I tell you how to do it, then it will be from me. But I know you're smart enough to figure out how to do it. So what does Shlomo do? The verse tells us, Vayishlach HaMelech, the king sent, Vayikra l'Shimi, and he says to him, Shimi, my friend, listen to the following. You are going to build a house in Yerushalayim, and you are going to live there. And you're never going to leave Yerushalayim. On the day that you leave Yerushalayim, on the day that you pass the valley of Kidron, you will die. That's what Shlomo says to Shimi. The king, Shlomo, makes Shimi take an oath, makes him take a shavua that he will follow these instructions, and Shimi moves to Yerushalayim. And the verse tells us, Vayhi miketz shalosh shanim. It was after 3 years, and 2 of Shimi's slaves fled to Philistine, and Shimi went after them to try to bring them back. And the king calls Shimi and says, Halo ishbaticha b'Hashem. I made you take an oath in the name of God that you will not leave Yerushalayim. And so he has Shimi executed for a crime. A very simple instruction by the king. Don't leave the city of Yerushalayim. And he could have had many reasons for why he would want this person who was formerly part of a rebellion or someone who he wants in his vicinity. And all the commentaries say, what is wrong with Shimi? 2 slaves ran away. He knows the king knows that he's leaving. What's wrong with Shimi? Chaim Shmulevitz was the mashgiach of the Mir Yeshiva in Yerushalayim. So as a mashgiach, and having many young men under his care, he understood the answer to that. He said, we can handle any instructions if they are our own. But when someone places upon us these instructions, they become a prison. And they eat away at us every single day. There are many people, even in modern days, who never left the city of Yerushalayim. Great righteous people who never left the city of Yerushalayim. What an incredible accomplishment. From the beginning, from their birth in Shaarei Tzedek Hospital, all the way to their whole life in Yerushalayim. Easy. There is nothing in the world that you can't get spiritually and physically in the city of Yerushalayim. Let's even extend it beyond the walls, the whole area. But that's because they choose to be there. But as soon as something becomes an obligation, it becomes a burden, it becomes, his words are, a prison. Not only that. But Shlomo didn't just tell him these are the instructions. He made him take a shavua, an oath by God. And that manifold increased this draw that Shimi had, which was eating away at him for 3 years. That's the brilliance of Shlomo HaMelech. Our sages tell us he was 12 years old when he became king. So even at the age of 12, he was the wisest man of all time, but even at the age of 12, he understood that anybody, let's say the other way, if someone was, if someone is unable to get out of bed, if someone is unable to get out of bed because of some illness, because of some imprisonment or something, every moment in their bed is torture. But if you need to get up, if there is something that's telling you that you have to wake up, that you get something, if some people, they simply can't get out of bed. If I'm busy with something that I like, let's say I'm at an amusement park, or I'm at a show, or this, I can go 3-4 hours without food and drink. I can fast all day because I'm going to some, but if I can't eat or drink, it becomes such a difficult burden. Have you ever seen people who they're looking at the clock, at the watch at the end of Yom Kippur or at the end of any fast day? They're counting, by now they've calculated nanoseconds. And then they come home and they start cooking. They start preparing. You should be running in and just throwing yourself inside a pot of food from the way that you were behaving till now. The answer is because the moment I can eat and I've got the food in front of me, I can wait an hour.
Well, when Yom Kippur starts, I usually drink a ton, and I'm thirsty 10 minutes after it starts. It's all in the mind. I know what it is.
I think that's a much better example than I have, right? I'm not thirsty. The second that I light candles or Yom Kippur starts, all of a sudden I'm parched and I feel like I've just walked through the Sahara for 3 weeks. And you start losing your ability to breathe because it's all in the head. Chukim are a sign of real avdus. We want the control. We don't even realize how much what we're doing is about keeping that control. And Shlomo knows that if you want to get someone to do something wrong, give him instructions without a reason. And give them the instructions in a way where he feels bound and imprisoned, and just watch. Just watch, and it'll happen. We say that Gadol ha-mitzuvah va'osa mimi she'eina mitzuvah va'osa. Greater is the person who does something when they're commanded more than someone who's not commanded. The Gemara tells us that there's 2 opinions in the Gemara whether a summa, someone who's blind, is obligated in the performance of mitzvahs. So the Gemara says that first Rabbi Yosef made a party when he found out, when someone taught him the opinion that Rabbi Yosef was blind. So when he heard the opinion that a blind person is not obligated in the mitzvahs, he made a party because he now gets to do it as a volunteer. He now gets to which then he found out Gadol ha-mitzvah va'osa, that greater is the person who does the mitzvahs when they're instructed to do so. So then later when he found out that there's an opinion that says that the blind person is obligated in the mitzvahs, then that's a greater. And Tosfos explains there, and the commentaries all discuss this. The reason is because when I'm instructed to do so, when I have a mitzvah, along with it comes an evil inclination. There's a drive, there's an internal drive to not do what I'm instructed by Hashem to do.
It's interesting that you made the analogy with food and eating, because reason is tam, which is taste.
No, interesting. Right, so being able to taste, the 2 are connected. So let's bring this back to where we started. Rashi tells us that the paraduma is the example of the mitzvah, which is a chok. And we're told that the paraduma is also the story of the Jewish people. The Jewish people who did what? Paraduma tamima, Para is the Jewish people, Aduma is the Jewish people, Tamima is the Jewish people, Asher Ein Bamum, no blemish, the Jewish people, Asher Lo Allah Allah Ha'ol refers to the generation of the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, who threw off, or as we said, refused to accept the yoke of the sovereignty of heaven. They wanted to serve Hashem the way they felt like serving Hashem. They wanted to serve Hashem based on what they understood made sense to them.
Isn't that every generation?
Well, as opposed to the previous generations, who understood this somewhat, and each generation is going to be different. But by the time it came to these people, this generation completely threw off the yoke of the sovereignty of heaven, and that's why the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. That's what the Medrash is saying. Asher lo Allah Allah ha'ol, the exact words of the Medrash, Asher lo Allah ha'ol, zedoro shel Yirmiyahu, shelo kiblu alehem olo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there's some line which they crossed, where they refused or threw away the yoke of the sovereignty of heaven completely, and they were destroyed. It doesn't say that they did Averos, at least not in this Medrash. And we know they committed the 3 cardinal sins. But this Medrash is focused on because they refused to accept the yoke. What's a yoke? A yoke is something which you put on the... You think about it. The Torah, what's the point of Asher lo Allah Allah ha'ol? The point is, it has to be an animal that's never been worked. As a matter of fact, it doesn't require a yoke. If you have the animal thresh or stomp on things and mash the grain, that's now no longer kosher as a paraduma. So why does there use the example of a yoke? The answer is because it's meant to teach us this remez, that the paraduma represents, yes, the chok of paraduma is stressed through the obligation and the requirement that the para aduma not have borne a yoke. The Jewish people are to experience the story of the exile, because that's us going through a process where the animal is slaughtered and the animal is burnt. But in the end, v'asaf ish tahor efer hapara, and with this will end. The ish tahor, that's Hashem, will gather not the dispersed of the Jewish people, but the efer, the ashes. Efer is the anochi afar ve'efer of Avraham Avinu. You know where Avraham said anochi afar ve'efer? When he was arguing with God. And in his debate with God, he says, God, I have no right, no permission to question you. But I would like to. Isn't that a contradiction? And the answer is no. Because as long as you understand that in the end, Anochi afar ve'efer, if you can accept that you are but dust and ashes, then you can come with your questions. If you realize you have to keep kosher because you have to keep kosher, and then you add to it this extra reason that gives you physical and spiritual health, then you can put the two together. But it has to start with Anochi afar ve'efer. If a person doesn't experience, if a person thinks that you only do what makes sense to you, then they don't have the entryway into the performance of the mitzvahs. So if the story of the Paraduma is the story of the Jewish people, the story of the Paraduma is the story of each of us, and this week's parsha is the parsha of Chok, we have to look within ourselves and see what's driving us, what's motivating us to perform the mitzvahs. And as we better ourselves, we should realize that our avoda is to take upon ourselves all Malchus Shamayim. With Shema we accept all Malchus Shamayim. And we say that in the end we do whatever Hashem commands us to do.